The battle for control of Congress still too close to project. Republicans are inching closer to a narrow House majority, while control of the Senate is hinged on a few very close races. Either party could secure a majority in that chamber, with wins in Nevada and Arizona where races are still undecided. And for the second time in 2 years, the Senate majority could come down to a runoff next month in Georgia, where Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock and Republican challenger Herschel Walker both failed to cross the 50% threshold to win the outright. Our team coverage continues now with ABC's White House correspondent Mary Alice Parks in Washington, Ike Kajachi in Atlanta, also Zoreen Shaw in Phoenix, and also our Jay O'Brien, who's up on Capitol Hill. So, Mary Alice, let's start with you. President Biden, well, he's boasting about this better-than-expected inflation report, but will it be enough to actually boost his political capital there in Washington?
I think so. I think it changes some of the dynamics going into the next Congress. It makes it easier for President Biden to put down and, in fact, potentially veto any new bills coming out of a potentially Republican-controlled Congress that he might think might hurt inflation. You heard the president make this threat yesterday. He said that he was prepared to use the veto pen in the event the Republicans passed legislation that he thought would hurt inflation. And I think these new numbers give him more credibility going into next year with that.
And so, Jay, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy did announce his bid for Speaker of the House. The battle for control there is still too close to project, though Republicans are expected to win a majority. What challenges could McCarthy face, you think, in this run for Speaker?
Yeah, Kira, Kevin McCarthy needs 218 votes to become the next Speaker of the House if the GOP takes back the House. And the slimmer their majority in that chamber, the harder it gets for McCarthy, because he's got to get that 218 threshold, obviously. And there are members of the far right of his party, the Freedom Caucus, some of them, who oppose McCarthy's bid for the speakership, something he's long wanted. They have said on Capitol Hill today, some said it yesterday, that they don't feel that McCarthy's done enough to earn their bid. Look at that. They have 211, right? McCarthy needs 218. So if you lose even a little bit of Republican support, if you can't hold the caucus together, there becomes issues for McCarthy. And again, they've said that the Republican wave that they were promised on election night didn't materialize. Some in the Freedom Caucus are blaming that on McCarthy, but they have not put forward their own candidate yet. So right now, there is no one who's officially opposing McCarthy's bid for the speakership. But that could potentially change next week when there are House leadership elections.
So split ticket voting playing a huge role in Georgia. Republican Governor Brian Kemp won with a strong lead against Democrat Stacey Abrams. Will he come out to help Herschel Walker, you think, in this runoff against Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock?
Well, Kira, here's what we know. Brian Kemp has proven to be the most popular Republican in the state. If you remember back to his primary, he defeated former Senator David Perdue, a Trump-endorsed candidate, by more than 50 points. Now, Walker and Kemp have yet to share a stage together, but that's not because Kemp doesn't want to. It's simply because Walker hasn't asked. Now, last week, we did know that Kemp did say that he'd be willing to share a stage with Walker, but that was before the midterm elections. Whether that'll happen now before the runoff remains to be seen. But Walker should want his endorsement. It's important to note that Walker was the only Georgia Republican in the midterm elections who failed to reach 50% of the vote, Kira.
So, Zoreen, Democratic Senator Mark Kelly there in Arizona holding a lead right now over Republican Blake Masters. What's the latest from Masters' campaign at this point?
Yeah, Masters last night says there's definitely a pathway. But, Kira, that's a shift. Just yesterday morning, he was saying they were confident in a win. And last night he added they cannot afford more drops like the one that they saw last night. Look, you saw the title of our podcast start here this morning. It was Stress in the West. I mean, that was perfectly titled from Brad Milkey. There was only 62,000 votes that were dropped last night. I mean, it's still a nail biter in a lot of these races. And those votes, for the most part, favored Democrats. Kelly, for his part, he's saying he's feeling good. He always knew this would be a very close race.
Mary Alice, the Nevada Senate seat still up for grabs. You've got Democrat Catherine Cortez Masto there in a close race against Republican Adam Laxalt. What's the latest from there?
Yeah, we're supposed to know a lot more information today. The county clerk right there in Clark County, that's the biggest county and most of the vote right in Las Vegas, said that they're planning to report results from about 14,000 ballots that were received on Election Day, but they hadn't been tabulated yet. But they also said that just yesterday, they received about 12,000 ballots in the mail. They haven't even started to process those yet, and there could be more still coming through the mail. Remember, Nevada is one of those states where a voter can drop their ballot in the mail on Election Day. So it could take a few days, especially from some of those more rural parts of the state, for all of those ballots to make their way through the mail and then be processed and counted. So patience is the name of the game still there.
That's kind of patience in politics. That's one we all have to think about there. Jay, if Republicans do win control of the House, it appears they would likely hold on only a slim majority, rather. Does that open the door, you think, for more bipartisanship? Possibly.
Well, firstly, it opens the door for House GOP leadership and likely Kevin McCarthy, who's poised to become the next speaker, right? Barring everything we just said, that he's got to wrangle the further right members of his party because they have an outsized role now if he doesn't have a large majority, because if they lose support on a particular issue, things of that nature, it could throw the whole thing into turmoil. It's worth pointing out, though, any legislation that would come out of a Republican-controlled House would largely be performative. They're talking about border security legislation on day one. They're talking about repealing parts of the Inflation Reduction Act on day one. But any legislation that passes out of the House goes up against that 60-vote threshold in the Senate, no matter who has control of that chamber. And then it goes on to the White House, where President Biden already said yesterday he would use his veto pen on legislation that is meant to be contrary to his agenda. So bipartisanship, it's not entirely clear. The other thing that's going to come out of this Republican House, if they take control of the House, are investigations into Hunter Biden, the Afghanistan withdrawal, President Biden himself, Kira.
Right. And what impact could a potential presidential announcement now from Donald Trump have on the Senate runoff there? I mean, we saw what happened during election night and, you know, the red wave that wasn't. So where do you think things stand now when it comes to, you know, the Trump influence factor?
Well, Kira, here is where we are right now. Former President Trump, right now, actually, he's facing mounting pressure from some of his closest allies to delay his announcement for a third bid for the White House until after the Georgia runoffs. Why? Well, a Trump announcement, will most certainly take the air out of the room and get attention away from this Georgia runoff race, something that very well could help Senator Raphael Warnock. Well, right now, all we do know is that next week, former President Trump is expected to have an event at his Florida estate in Mar-a-Lago where he is expected to make his announcement. Whether he'll go through with it is a completely different story, Kira.
Well, we're standing by. Ike, Mary Alice, Zorine, and Jay, thank you all so much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.